The morning sky above London turned dark as massive shadows blocked out the sun. Maria Santos looked up from her morning coffee and watched through her apartment window as enormous ships descended through the clouds. The vessels were unlike anything she had ever seen, their hulls gleaming silver and stretching for miles across the horizon. Similar scenes played out across every major city on Earth as the alien fleet took position in the atmosphere. Admiral Thane stood on the bridge of his flagship, reviewing the data his scouts had collected about this primitive world. The humans used crude combustion engines, had barely touched their own moon, and their most advanced weapons were simple nuclear devices. According to Karathi intelligence, Earth would fall within days, just like the 17 other worlds his empire had conquered. The Karathi had perfected the art of conquest over 3 centuries. Their energy weapons could level entire cities in minutes. Their shields deflected any primitive attacks. Their soldiers were genetically enhanced warriors who had never known defeat. Most importantly, they understood that inferior species always surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. General Rodriguez rushed into the Pentagon's emergency command center as alarms blared throughout the building. Satellite feeds showed alien ships positioned over every major population center on the planet. The vessels were massive, each one larger than several city blocks, and clearly displayed technology far beyond human capability. His military advisors scrambled to assess their options, but the conclusion was obvious to everyone in the room. Tom Walsh was working under the hood of a broken-down truck when his radio crackled with emergency broadcasts. He wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls and turned up the volume. The news anchors spoke in urgent tones about alien ships appearing worldwide and governments calling for calm. Tom stepped outside his garage and looked up at the sky. Sure enough, a massive ship hung motionless above his small town, its shadow covering several neighborhoods. Dr. Lisa Park was treating a patient when every phone in the hospital began buzzing with emergency alerts. The head nurse burst into the examination room with wide eyes pointing toward the window. Through the glass, they could see one of the alien vessels hovering above the city center. Lisa excused herself and joined the crowd of doctors and nurses, gathering in the hallway, all staring at their phones as news reports flooded in from around the world. The Karathi broadcast began at exactly noon. Greenwich Mean Time. Every television, radio, and communication device on Earth received the signal. Simultaneously, the voice spoke in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and dozens of other human languages. The translation was flawless, indicating the aliens had been studying Earth for some time. People of Earth, the voice announced with mechanical precision. We are the Karathi Empire. Your world is now under our control. We offer you one opportunity to surrender peacefully. Lay down your weapons, abandon your governance, and submit to imperial rule. You have 72 hours to comply. Failure to surrender will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. The message repeated in every major language. While holographic displays appeared above major cities, showing images of other worlds the Karathi had conquered, the holograms depicted advanced civilizations reduced to rubble, their populations enslaved or eliminated. The message was clear. Resistance was futile, but something unexpected happened in the hours following the ultimatum. Instead of panic and chaos, humans began doing what they had always done when faced with impossible situations. They started talking to each other. Phone networks, already strained by the crisis, carried millions of conversations between families, friends, and strangers. Social media platforms buzzed with coordination efforts as people shared information and resources. Captain Rex, the Karathi intelligence officer, monitored human communications and found the patterns confusing. Most conquered species responded to their ultimatum with either immediate surrender or chaotic violence. These humans were doing neither. Instead, they seemed to be organizing. Military bases worldwide received floods of volunteers. Factories began retooling their production lines without government orders. Scientists started sharing research data across national boundaries with unprecedented openness. Tom Walsh closed his garage early and drove to the town hall, where a crowd had gathered for an emergency meeting. The mayor stood on the steps, trying to maintain order as citizens shouted questions and suggestions. Tom noticed something interesting about the crowd. Instead of panic, he saw determination. Instead of despair, he saw people rolling up their sleeves and asking what needed to be done. Dr. Park found herself appointed to coordinate the hospital's emergency response as staff members volunteered for extended shifts. Medical students drove. And from universities hundreds of miles away, retired doctors and nurses came out of retirement. The hospital, which normally struggled with staffing shortages, suddenly had more volunteers than they could accommodate. Maria Santos, an industrial engineer, received calls from colleagues across Europe. Companies were sharing proprietary technologies and manufacturing processes. Competitors were becoming collaborators overnight. University researchers were publishing preliminary findings in real time instead of waiting for peer review. The entire scientific and industrial community seemed to be operating as a single organism. General Rodriguez watched the global response with growing amazement. His intelligence reports showed similar patterns worldwide. Military recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers. Civilian engineers were submitting weapons designs. Amateur radio operators were creating redundant communication networks. Farmers were organizing food distribution systems. It was as if the entire human race had decided to treat the alien invasion as a problem, to be solved rather than a disaster to be endured. Admiral Thane reviewed the reports from his intelligence officers with growing confusion. The humans were not behaving according to any pattern the Korathi had encountered. They were not surrendering, but they were not launching futile attacks either. Instead, they appeared to be preparing for something. Their industrial output was increasing. Their communication networks were expanding. Their military forces were dispersing and adapting in ways that suggested long-term planning rather than desperate resistance. As the 72-hour deadline approached, humans around the world continued their unprecedented collaboration. Languages' barriers seemed to dissolve as translation software improved overnight. Cultural differences were set aside as communities focused on common survival. Religious leaders preached unity while political opponents worked side by side in emergency committees. The most disturbing aspect, from the Korathi perspective, was the humans' apparent lack of fear. Instead of the terror and desperation that typically preceded surrender, the aliens observed curiosity and determination. Humans were studying the alien ships with telescopes and improvised sensors. They were analyzing the holographic displays for weaknesses. They were treating the invasion as a learning opportunity. When the deadline expired without Earth's surrender, Admiral Thane prepared for the next phase of conquest. But something in the back of his mind suggested this campaign might not follow the usual pattern. These humans were different from any species the Korathi had encountered. They seemed to view the impossible not as a reason to give up, but as a challenge to overcome. The invasion of Earth was about to begin, and neither side fully understood what they were truly facing. The 72 hours had passed and Earth remained defiant. Admiral Thane stood before the massive viewing screen on his flagship, watching the blue and green planet rotate slowly below him. No surrender broadcasts had been received. No white flags flew over the major cities. The humans had chosen resistance over survival, a decision that puzzled but did not concern him. He had dealt with stubborn species before. "Begin limited bombardment," Thane commanded his weapons officer. "Target their military installations. 3 strikes should be sufficient to demonstrate our power." The energy beams lanced down from orbit. With brilliant flashes of light, the first strike vaporized an Air Force base in Nevada, leaving nothing but a smoking crater where hangars and runways had stood moments before. The second beam destroyed a naval facility in Japan, turning ships and docks into twisted metal. The third obliterated a radar installation in England, a massive dish array melting like ice under a blowtorch. Captain Rex monitored human communications during the attacks, expecting to record the usual messages of surrender that followed. Such demonstrations, instead he heard something entirely different. Within minutes of each strike, human voices filled the airwaves with damage reports, casualty counts, and evacuation procedures. But instead of fear, he detected anger. Instead of despair, he heard determination. Tom Walsh was listening to his radio when news of the attacks reached his small town. The announcer described the destruction with clinical precision, then immediately began reading lists of emergency supplies needed for survivors. Tom looked at his garage, filled with spare parts and tools, and made a decision. As he loaded his pickup truck with everything useful he could carry and drove toward the nearest distribution center, Dr. Park received the first casualties from the naval base attack within hours. Her hospital had been transformed into a trauma center with medical volunteers working around the clock. But what struck her most was the behavior of the injured. Sailors and civilians alike asked not about their own condition, but about when they could return to help with the defense effort. She had never seen wounded patients so eager to rejoin a fight they had no hope of winning. Maria Santos found herself in an emergency meeting with engineers from across Europe. The alien attacks had destroyed specific targets, but the humans were already analyzing the destruction patterns. The energy beams left distinctive signatures in the melted materials. The targeting systems showed preferences for certain types of installations. Within days, human scientists were building mathematical models of the alien weapons. Looking for weaknesses and countermeasures, Admiral Thane expected his demonstration to break human morale. But the intelligence reports painted a different picture. Instead of retreating, human military forces were dispersing into smaller, more mobile units. Instead of shutting down, their factories were working overtime, producing equipment and supplies at unprecedented rates. Instead of isolating themselves, human nations were sharing resources and information with remarkable efficiency. The first ground assault began 1 week after the bombardment. Karathi soldiers, genetically enhanced warriors standing 7 feet tall and armed with energy weapons, descended from their transport ships expecting to face demoralized opponents. Captain Karos led the assault on London, confident that his troops would secure the city within hours. But the humans had used their time well. The Karathi found themselves fighting not a conventional army, but an entire population. Office workers threw improvised explosives from building windows. Construction crews used heavy machinery to create barriers and traps. Underground transit systems had been converted into defensive networks that allowed human fighters to appear and disappear like ghosts. Tom Walsh joined the resistance in his hometown when Karathi troops landed in the nearby countryside. He had never been a soldier, but his knowledge of local terrain and mechanical systems made him valuable to the defense effort. He helped modify civilian vehicles into mobile weapons platforms and taught other volunteers how to maintain captured alien equipment. The Karathi weapons were advanced, but they still followed basic principles of energy and mechanics that Tom could understand. Dr. Park's hospital became an unofficial command center for the city's resistance movement. Personnel had natural access to communication networks and supply chains, making them ideal coordinators for guerrilla operations. She found herself treating wounded Karathi soldiers alongside human casualties, a decision that initially confused her, but gradually revealed important intelligence about alien biology and psychology. Captain, Rex analyzed the ground combat reports. With growing concern, the Karathi were accustomed to facing organized military units with clear command structures and predictable tactics. These humans fought differently. They had no central command that could be captured or destroyed. Every civilian seemed to be a potential combatant, but they also maintained their roles as doctors, engineers, and workers. The humans were treating the war as a part-time occupation while continuing to function as a society. More disturbing was the speed at which humans adapted to Karathi technology. Within days of the first ground assault, human fighters were using captured energy weapons with surprising skill. They had figured out how to recharge the alien power cells using their own electrical systems. Some had even begun modifying the weapons, improving their efficiency and adding features the original designers had never intended. Maria Santos led a team of engineers in reverse engineering a damaged Karathi transport ship. The alien technology was centuries ahead of human science, but the basic principles were surprisingly familiar. Magnetic fields, energy conversion, and propulsion systems all followed laws of physics that humans understood. The challenge was not comprehending the technology, but building it with their limited resources. Admiral Thane received reports that challenged everything he understood about conquest warfare. The humans were not just fighting his forces. They were learning from them. Every battle provided new intelligence about Karathi tactics, technology, and psychology. The humans shared this information instantly across their global network, meaning that lessons learned in London were immediately applied in Tokyo, New York, and every other battleground. Captain Karras found himself facing an impossible situation in London. His troops controlled the major government buildings and transportation hubs, but they did not control the city. Human fighters melted away when confronted by superior force, only to reappear elsewhere with better weapons and improved tactics. The Karathi were winning every engagement. While somehow losing the war, the most unsettling development was the behavior of captured Karathi soldiers. Humans treated their prisoners with unexpected dignity, providing medical care and even attempting conversation. Several Karathi warriors had begun questioning their empire's methods when faced with human civilians who showed them kindness instead of hatred. Some had even begun sharing information about Karathi society and technology, not through torture or coercion, but through simple curiosity and mutual respect. Tom Walsh experienced this firsthand when his resistance cell captured a wounded Karathi scout. Instead of interrogating the alien, they treated his injuries and offered food and shelter. The scout, a young warrior named Dex, was bewildered by the treatment. He had expected execution or imprisonment, not medical care and genuine concern. For his welfare? Over several days of recovery, Dex began teaching the humans about Karathi technology in exchange for lessons about human culture and history. Dr. Park made a breakthrough when she successfully performed surgery on a captured Karathi officer. The alien's biology was different from human physiology, but not incompetably so. During the officer's recovery, she learned that Karathi society was rigidly hierarchical, with individuals assigned roles based on genetic modifications. The concept of humans choosing their own professions and working together, despite their differences, fascinated the recovering warrior. Captain Rex compiled his intelligence reports with growing unease. The humans were not behaving like any conquered species in Karathi records. They were treating the invasion as a learning experience, approaching each challenge with curiosity rather than desperation. They seemed to view the Karathi not as invaders, to be destroyed, but as teachers to be studied and understood. Most concerning was the humans' apparent lack of hatred. Despite the bombardment and ground assaults, they showed no desire for revenge against individual Karathi soldiers. They fought fiercely when attacked, but they also offered mercy to defeated enemies. This behavior was entirely outside Karathi experience and made standard psychological warfare tactics ineffective. Admiral Thane studied the reports from his command center, watching his supposedly inevitable victory slip away like water through his fingers. The humans were not just resisting, they were evolving. Every day brought new innovations, new tactics, and new technologies adapted from captured Karathi equipment. They were turning his own empire's strengths against him, while displaying weaknesses that somehow made them stronger. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Thane began to consider the possibility that the Karathi Empire might not win this war. 3 weeks had passed since the Karathi invasion began, and Admiral Thane faced a situation he had never encountered in 30 years of conquest campaigns. His forces controlled major strategic points across Earth, but they did not control the planet. The humans had not surrendered, had not collapsed into chaos, and had not been broken by superior force. Instead, they had adapted, evolved, and begun fighting back with increasing effectiveness. Maria Santos worked in an underground facility, beneath the ruins of a bombed factory, leading a team of engineers and scientists from 12 different countries. They had successfully reverse-engineered several pieces of Karathi technology, including the energy weapons that had once seemed impossibly advanced. The key breakthrough came when they realized the aliens' weapons operated on principles similar to human plasma physics, just applied with far greater sophistication and efficiency. The captured Korathi power cells were particularly interesting. Maria's team discovered they could be recharged using modified human electrical systems. But more importantly, they could be improved. The aliens had designed their technology for reliability and standardization across their empire. Humans, with their chaotic creativity and willingness to take risks, began modifying the power cells to produce higher outputs and longer operational periods. Tom Walsh had become something of a local legend in his resistance cell. His natural mechanical aptitude, combined with captured Korathi equipment, had turned him into an expert on alien technology. He could repair damaged energy weapons, modify transport vehicles, and even jury-rig communication devices to intercept Korathi transmissions. More importantly, he taught these skills to other volunteers, creating a network of human technicians who understood alien systems better than many Korathi soldiers. The alien scout decks had become an unofficial member of Tom's group. The young Korathi warrior had been so impressed by human ingenuity and kindness that he began actively helping the resistance. He taught them Korathi tactical procedures, explained the weaknesses in their equipment, and provided insights into the alien command structure. Dex was particularly amazed by humanity's ability to learn from everyone, regardless of their background or species. Dr. Park's hospital had evolved into something resembling a multicultural medical research center. Human doctors worked alongside captured Korathi medics, sharing knowledge about both species, biology, and physiology. The aliens were fascinated by human medicine, which emphasized healing and recovery rather than simply maintaining combat effectiveness. Several Korathi medical personnel had begun questioning their empire's philosophy after witnessing human doctors save the lives of wounded alien soldiers. The breakthrough that changed everything came from an unexpected source. Kevin Chen, a quantum physicist from Beijing, had been studying the Korathi communication systems with the help of Dex and other cooperative aliens. Human scientists had always assumed faster-than-light communication was impossible, but the Korathi used it routinely to coordinate their empire across multiple star systems. Kevin's team discovered that Korathi communications relied on quantum entanglement networks that could be disrupted by specific electromagnetic frequencies. The aliens had never encountered this vulnerability, because none of their previous conquests had possessed the necessary understanding of quantum mechanics. Humans, with their diverse scientific traditions and willingness to experiment with dangerous theories, found the weakness almost by accident. The first successful disruption test was conducted in a small town in Montana. When the human resistance activated their improvised quantum disruptor, every Korathi soldier in a 10-mile radius lost contact with their command structure. The aliens found themselves operating blind, unable to coordinate with their units or receive orders from their ships. The local resistance, led by a rancher named Bill Foster, captured an entire Korathi patrol without firing a shot. Word of the success spread through human networks with incredible speed. Within days, similar disruptors were being built in dozens of locations using materials scavenged from electronic stores, universities, and industrial facilities. The humans had discovered that Korathi soldiers, despite their physical enhancements and advanced weapons, became confused and ineffective when separated from their rigid command hierarchy. Anna Kowalski, factory supervisor from Detroit, led her workers in converting an automobile manufacturing plant to produce anti-gravity countermeasures. The humans had observed that Korathi ships and vehicles used controlled gravity fields for propulsion and maneuvering. By studying the mathematics behind these systems, Anna's team developed devices that could create localized gravity distortions, effectively grounding alien aircraft and disabling their ground vehicles. Captain Rex found himself filing reports that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Human industrial capacity was not decreasing under Korathi occupation. It was increasing. Their military effectiveness was not deteriorating. It was improving. Their social structure was not collapsing. It was strengthening through shared adversity. Every assumption the Korathi had made about conquest warfare was being proven wrong. The most disturbing development was the growing number of Korathi soldiers who were defecting to the human side. These were not cowards or weaklings. experienced warriors who had become convinced that the Empire's methods were wrong. They spoke of humans who treated them as individuals rather than enemies, who asked for their opinions and listened to their concerns, who offered them choices instead of simply issuing orders. Dave Miller, former Army Ranger, had organized a network of civilian militias that moved through urban environments like a coordinated organism. His fighters included teachers, shopkeepers, students, and retirees, all trained in basic guerrilla tactics and equipped with a mixture of human and alien weapons. What made them truly dangerous was their intimate knowledge of their own neighborhoods and their ability to communicate with the local population. Dave's most successful operation involved the capture of a Korathi command post in downtown Chicago. Instead of a direct assault, his team spent 3 days studying the alien patrol patterns and communication procedures. They then used captured equipment to send false orders that dispersed the Korathi guards, while human engineers cut power to the building's defensive systems. The command post fell without a single casualty on either side. Admiral Thane reviewed the strategic situation with growing alarm. His forces held territory on every continent, but they were isolated in fortified positions, unable to move freely or expand their control. The humans had turned the entire planet into a hostile environment where Korathi technology was studied, copied, and improved upon. Worse, they were sharing their discoveries with each other instantly through communication networks that seemed to function regardless of what the aliens did to disrupt them. The psychological impact on his forces was becoming critical. Korathi's soldiers were accustomed to quick, decisive victories against opponents who recognized their superiority. Humans fought with captured alien weapons, showed no fear of superior technology, treated defeated Korathi with unexpected kindness. Many of his warriors were beginning to question not just the mission, but the entire imperial system they had been raised to serve. Captain Carus reported from London that his occupying force was effectively besieged within their own defensive perimeter. The humans had surrounded Korathi positions with what they called learning networks, groups of scientists, engineers, and volunteers who studied every aspect of alien technology and behavior. These networks shared information instantly across the globe, meaning that any tactical innovation discovered in London was immediately available to resistance groups in Tokyo, Sydney, and every other occupied city. The situation reached a tipping point when human scientists successfully reverse-engineered a Korathi faster-than-light communication device. The aliens had assumed their quantum entanglement technology was beyond human comprehension. But a team led by Dr. Sarah Kim in Seoul had cracked the basic principles within 2 weeks. Suddenly, human resistance groups could coordinate their activities across interstellar distances, sharing information and resources with a speed that matched Korathi capabilities. But the humans did something the Korathi had never considered. Instead of using their new communication technology purely for military purposes, they began reaching out to other worlds in the Korathi Empire. They sent messages of hope and solidarity to the 17 conquered civilizations, sharing their discoveries and offering assistance in throwing off imperial rule. Admiral Thane received reports that shook him to his core. Resistance movements were erupting on worlds that had been pacified for decades. The Korathi Empire, which had maintained control through isolation and intimidation, suddenly faced coordinated rebellion across multiple star systems. The humans had not just refused to surrender, they had inspired others to fight back. The war that was supposed to end in 72 hours had become a galaxy-spanning revolution. And the Korathi Empire was losing control not just of Earth, but of their entire civilization. The humans had discovered something that the Empire had never encountered: the power of shared knowledge, mutual respect, and the unshakable belief that every intelligent being deserved freedom and dignity. For the first time in Korathi history, Admiral Thane began to consider the possibility of negotiating with an enemy instead of simply defeating them. 2 months after the first Korathi ships appeared over Earth, the strategic situation had completely reversed in ways that defied every military textbook in the Empire's archives. Admiral Thane stood in his command center, staring at holographic displays that showed red warning indicators across 17 star systems. The humans had not only survived the initial invasion, but had somehow turned it into the spark that ignited rebellion throughout the Karathi Empire. Lieutenant Colonel Beth Murphy led the most ambitious human operation yet attempted. Her combined force included former soldiers, civilian volunteers, and surprisingly, over 30 Karathi defectors who had joined the human cause. Their target was the command ship Dominator, a massive vessel that served as the regional headquarters. For Karathi operations in the European theater, the plan was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications. The operation began not with guns blazing, but with a carefully orchestrated display of human ingenuity. Beth's team used modified construction equipment to create artificial asteroids filled with sensor equipment and communication devices. These improvised satellites were launched into orbit using repurposed civilian rockets, creating a surveillance network that tracked every Karathi ship movement. The aliens found themselves being watched by the very humans they thought they were controlling. Tom Walsh had become the unofficial leader of human Karathi cooperation in his region. Working alongside Dex and 12 other alien defectors, he had established workshops where humans and Karathi shared knowledge and techniques. The aliens were amazed by human creativity and willingness to experiment, while humans learned advanced engineering principles that would have taken decades to discover independently. These collaboration centers were producing hybrid technologies that surpassed what either species could achieve alone. The breakthrough came when Dr. Park successfully convinced an entire Karathi medical unit to defect by demonstrating human surgical techniques on a critically injured alien commander. The Karathi medics had been trained to maintain their soldiers' combat effectiveness, but they had never witnessed medicine focus purely on healing and preserving life. When the human doctors saved the commander's life using procedures that Karathi medicine considered impossible, the entire unit requested asylum and began sharing their advanced medical knowledge. Maria Santos found herself at the center of humanity's most significant technological leap. Working with Karathi engineers who had joined the human cause, her team had successfully reverse-engineered not just individual components, but entire systems. They had built their own faster-than-light communication network, developed anti-gravity propulsion systems, and most importantly, created their own spacecraft capable of interstellar travel, the first human-built. Starship was a strange hybrid of terrestrial and alien technology. Its hull was constructed from materials manufactured in converted car factories. Its engines were based on Karathi designs, but improved with human innovations. Its life support systems represented the best of both species' knowledge. More importantly, its crew included both humans and Karathi working together as equals, something that had never existed in the Empire's rigid hierarchy. Kevin Chen's quantum physics team had made discoveries that impressed even the most advanced Karathi scientists by combining human theoretical knowledge with alien practical experience. They had developed new applications for faster-than-light technology that the Empire had never considered. They could now disrupt Karathi communications across multiple star systems simultaneously, effectively blinding the Imperial fleet whenever they chose to activate their quantum disruptors. The capture of the Dominator began with a conversation rather than an attack. Beth Murphy's team used their advanced communication systems to contact the ship directly, bypassing military channels and speaking to individual crew members. They broadcast messages in perfect Karathi, explaining human philosophy and inviting dialogue. The psychological impact was devastating to Imperial morale, as ordinary soldiers heard concepts like individual choice and personal freedom for the first time in their lives. Captain Rex found himself in an impossible position. Half of his intelligence unit had requested transfers to work with human scientific teams, claiming they could learn more in a week of human collaboration than in years of Imperial service. His reports to Admiral Thane painted a picture of an empire crumbling, not from military defeat, but from ideological conversion. The humans were not destroying Karathi culture. They were offering it something better. Anna Kowalski's industrial teams had achieved the impossible by converting Earth's manufacturing capacity to produce interstellar-capable technology within weeks. Her factories were producing not just weapons and vehicles, but entire space habitats that could support mixed human Karathi populations. The aliens were astounded by human manufacturing flexibility and the speed at which entire industries could be retooled for completely different purposes. The rebellion that began on Earth had spread to every world in the Karathi Empire through a combination of human communication, technology, and simple inspiration. Conquered civilizations that had accepted imperial rule for generations suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. But the humans did something unprecedented. They shared their discoveries freely with every species they contacted, asking for nothing in return except the chance to learn and grow together, Dave. Miller's guerrilla networks had evolved into something resembling diplomatic missions. His teams were no longer just fighting Karathi forces. They were negotiating with them. Many alien units had begun surrendering not because they were defeated, but because they wanted to join the human cause. The sight of humans and Karathi working together as equals was more powerful than any weapon in convincing Imperial soldiers to switch sides. The final assault on the Dominator lasted 6 hours and resulted in 0 casualties on either side. Beth Murphy's forces had used their superior intelligence network to identify every Karathi soldier who was wavering in their loyalty to the Empire. When the human attack began, it was coordinated with a simultaneous offer of amnesty and invitation to join the growing coalition of free worlds. Faced with the choice between fighting for an empire that treated them as expendable resources or joining a movement that valued them as individuals, most of the ship's crew chose freedom. Admiral Thane received the surrender of the Dominator with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. The humans had not captured his ship through superior firepower. They had convinced his crew to abandon their posts through superior ideas. The tactical implications were staggering, but the strategic implications were even worse. If humans could turn his most loyal soldiers against the Empire through simple conversation, then no Karathi position was secure. The captured command ship provided humanity with complete intelligence about Karathi operations throughout the galaxy. But instead of using this information to plan military strikes, the humans did something characteristically unexpected. They began sending diplomatic missions to other worlds, offering aid and assistance to both conquered civilizations and Karathi administrators who were willing to consider alternative forms of government. Captain Karos found himself commanding a Karathi unit that was more interested in learning human languages and customs than in maintaining military discipline. His soldiers had begun requesting assignments to work with human technical teams, claiming they could contribute more to the war effort by sharing knowledge than by fighting. The traditional imperial military structure was dissolving, not through defeat, but through voluntary transformation. The tide of war had turned completely. The Karathi Empire, which had dominated the galaxy through military might and rigid hierarchy, was being transformed by human concepts of cooperation, individual dignity, and shared progress. Worlds that had been conquered decades ago were declaring independence, not to fight the Empire, but to join the growing coalition of species working together toward common goals. Admiral Thane realized that his empire faced a choice that no military force had ever confronted. They could continue fighting a war they could not win against an enemy that refused to hate them. Or they could accept the humans' repeated offers of partnership and transformation. The invasion of Earth had become something no one had anticipated, an opportunity for the entire galaxy to evolve beyond conquest and domination towards something entirely new. 1 year after the first Karathi ships appeared over Earth, Admiral Thane stood in what had once been his military command center, now transformed into a bustling diplomatic meeting hall. Representatives from 18 different species worked together at tables that had been arranged in circles, rather than the hierarchical rows preferred by imperial protocol. The Karathi Empire had officially surrendered 3 months ago, but not in any way that military history books had ever recorded. The transformation began when Captain Rex formally requested permission to establish the first interspecies cooperation council on the former imperial capital world of Korathia Prime. The request came not from defeated enemies seeking terms, but from former imperial officers who had witnessed human civilization and wanted to create something similar for their own people. The humans had agreed immediately, offering technical assistance educational resources, most importantly their friendship. Dr. Park found herself serving as Earth's first ambassador to the galactic community, a role she had never imagined. When she was treating patients in a small hospital just 1 year ago, her background in medicine had proven invaluable in diplomatic work. As she approached interspecies relations with the same careful attention to healing and recovery that she had once applied to individual patients, the galaxy, she had learned, needed healing just as much as any wounded person. The former Admiral Thane had requested a new title that reflected his changed role. He was now simply called Thane, serving as the coordinator for educational initiatives throughout the former empire. His genetic enhancements, originally designed for military command, had proven surprisingly useful for managing complex social programs across multiple worlds. Working with human educators, he was establishing schools that taught cooperation alongside traditional subjects. Tom Walsh had never expected to become a starship designer, but his natural mechanical ability combined with Korathi engineering knowledge had made him one of the most sought-after technicians in the galaxy. His workshops, scattered across dozens of worlds, produced hybrid technologies that were more advanced than anything either species had developed alone. More importantly, they served as cultural meeting places where humans and aliens worked side by side as equals. The revolution had spread far beyond military conquest to encompass every aspect of galactic civilization. Maria Santos now led the Interspecies Technology Sharing Initiative, a program that had eliminated the concept of proprietary technology throughout the former empire. Scientific discoveries were shared instantly across all member worlds, leading to advances in medicine, engineering, and physics that benefited everyone. The humans had introduced a radical concept. Knowledge belonged to all intelligent beings, not just those powerful enough to hoard it. Dex had become something of a celebrity among young Korathi, representing the first generation to grow up with choices about their own lives. His story of joining the human resistance and discovering friendship across species lines was taught in schools throughout the galaxy, but Dex remained humble about his role, preferring to work in Tom's workshops where he could teach alien engineering to human students and learn human creativity from his former enemies. The economic transformation was, perhaps, the most dramatic change of all. Anna Kowalski's manufacturing networks had evolved into a galaxy-spanning industrial cooperative, where worlds specialized in producing goods and services for the benefit of all members. The old imperial system of tribute and exploitation had been replaced by voluntary trade agreements based on mutual benefit and shared prosperity. Worlds that had been impoverished under imperial rule were now thriving as equal partners in the galactic economy. Kevin Chen's quantum physics research had unlocked technologies that made faster-than-light travel as common as international air. Travel had once been on Earth, but the humans had insisted that these technologies be available to all species, not just those with military power. The result was a galaxy where information, people, and ideas flowed freely between worlds, creating a cultural renaissance that surprised everyone with its creativity and diversity. The most significant change was in education. Beth Murphy had left military service to establish the Galactic Peace Corps, an organization that sent volunteers to worlds throughout the former empire to teach human concepts of cooperation and individual dignity. These volunteers worked alongside local educators to create school systems that emphasized critical thinking, creativity, and personal choice rather than obedience and conformity. Dave Miller's former guerrilla networks had transformed into disaster response teams that provided assistance wherever it was needed throughout the galaxy. When natural disasters struck, when conflicts erupted between different species, or when worlds faced economic difficulties, these teams appeared with resources, expertise, and most importantly, hope. They had proven that the human talent for organization and cooperation could be used to build rather than destroy. The children were the most visible sign of the new paradigm. On the former imperial capital, human and Koratha youngsters played together in parks that had once been military parade grounds. They spoke multiple languages, shared toys and games from different worlds, and treated interspecies friendship as the most natural thing in the universe. Dr. Park often watched these children and saw the future that humanity had made possible. The transformation was not without challenges. Some former imperial worlds struggled with the concept of self-governance after generations of authoritarian rule. Certain species had difficulty adapting to the new emphasis on individual choice and personal responsibility. But the humans approached these problems with the same patient determination they had shown during the invasion, treating each challenge as an opportunity to learn and grow together. Captain Karus had established the Galactic Mediation Service, using his military experience to help resolve conflicts between different species and worlds. But instead of imposing solutions through force, his teams used human techniques of negotiation and compromise. They had discovered that most conflicts could be resolved when all parties felt heard and respected, something the old imperial system had never attempted. Tom Walsh stood in his workshop on Earth, watching his daughter play with a young Karathi child while their parents worked on a new starship design. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago, but now it seemed as natural as sunrise. The aliens had come to conquer Earth, but instead, they had found something they had never known they were looking for. A home. The galaxy celebrated the first anniversary of what historians were calling the Great Transformation. Festivals were held on hundreds of worlds, featuring music, art, and food from dozens of different species. The celebrations were voluntary, organized by local communities rather than imperial decree, and they reflected the genuine joy that beings throughout the galaxy felt about their new freedom and cooperation. Admiral Thane, now simply Thane, spoke at the main celebration on Earth. His words were translated into over 50 languages and broadcast to every member world of the new Galactic Federation. He spoke of the lessons his people had learned from humanity, that strength came from cooperation rather than domination, that diversity was a source of innovation rather than conflict, and that every intelligent being deserved respect and dignity, regardless of their species or background. Dr. Park concluded the celebration with a simple observation that captured the essence of what had happened. The aliens had come to Earth expecting to find another weak civilization to exploit. Instead, they had found something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that conquered through inclusion, that won wars by making enemies into family, and that turned every challenge into an opportunity to build something better. The humans had given the galaxy something it had never possessed: hope. Not the hope of victory over enemies, but the hope of friendship with strangers. Not the hope of power over others, but the hope of working together toward common dreams. The invasion that was supposed to end human civilization had instead begun a new chapter in galactic history, one where cooperation replaced conquest and understanding replaced fear. As the celebrations continued into the night, children from a dozen different worlds played together under alien stars, speaking in languages their parents had never heard, dreaming dreams that no previous generation could have imagined. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what humanity had always intended.